The air was thick with tension as the mining crew worked tirelessly, the hum of their equipment vibrating through the rocky core of the Earth. At first, it had been an ordinary day, just like any other in the dark, subterranean world where miners drilled for rare minerals. But today was different. Today they had stumbled upon something impossible. Deep beneath the surface, in a long-forgotten section of the Earth's crust, the mining drill encountered something unexpected, an enormous, perfectly smooth metallic structure. It was unlike anything they had seen before, its surface dark and sleek, as though it had been untouched for millennia. The team's lead engineer, Daniel Hayes, was the first to notice the anomaly on his scanner. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, pushing the scanner's readings into view for his team. They all stared, bewildered. The readings were off the charts. No known material could produce such a dense energy signature. The artifact was ancient, but it hummed with an inexplicable vitality. It was alive in ways they couldn't comprehend. "Get Dr. Quinn," Hayes barked, his voice urgent. Dr. Elara Quinn, a renowned archaeologist and physicist, was summoned from the surface. Her expertise in ancient technologies and her keen understanding of energy sources made her the perfect candidate to decipher this mystery. As she arrived at the excavation site, she was struck by the overwhelming sense of history. This wasn't just a relic, it was a key. Dr. Quinn approached the massive object, her eyes scanning the intricate markings on its surface. Her fingers trembled as she traced a series of alien symbols, some resembling forgotten human languages, others completely foreign. With a deep breath, she activated the interface embedded within the artifact. A strange, melodic hum filled the air, and the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. The miners, standing back, watched in stunned silence as an iridescent pulse of light shot from the artifact, flickering across the cavern. A sharp, unsettling noise rang out, a frequency that seemed to vibrate with an unknown power. The artifact responded to Dr. Quinn's touch, unlocking a dormant signal that had been waiting for centuries. It wasn't just a signal, it was a beacon, one that had been calling out into the void. Unbeknownst to the humans, the signal had already been intercepted. Far above the Earth, in the cold, distant reaches of space, a fleet of Ziphian warships drifted through the stars. They were an ancient race of conquerors, cold and ruthless, who had subjugated countless civilizations across the galaxy. For millennia, they had erased any trace of resistance. But when the signal reached their long-dormant communication systems, their leaders knew that something had shifted. The Earth was no longer an insignificant planet. The beacon from the artifact had reignited an ancient conflict, and humanity had just become a threat. In the Ziphian war room, High Commander Jorak stood before a council of his most trusted lieutenants. His eyes narrowed in disdain as the data from Earth filled the display. "The humans have awoken something," he growled. "We've ignored them for too long, but now they have access to a power we can't allow to spread." A younger officer spoke up, his voice full of conviction. "Shall we send the fleet, Commander?" Zorak's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Yes, it's time we remind them that there are no true rivals to the might of the Xiphians. Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. Earth will fall within the week." Back on Earth, Dr. Quinn had no idea that the fate of her planet was now inextricably linked to the alien forces of the Xiphians. As the artifact pulsed with energy, she felt a strange connection to it, as if the very fabric of the universe was awakening around her. She had no idea what dangers lay ahead, but one thing was certain: humanity's path had changed forever. The battle for survival had just begun. The beacon was now active, and the universe was listening. The morning after the artifact's activation, a strange stillness blanketed the Earth. The usual bustle of city life had slowed, the air thick with an unspoken tension. News outlets were flooded with reports of unusual seismic activity, strange atmospheric disturbances, and unexplained energy surges coming from beneath the ground. To the average person, it seemed like the Earth was responding to something unknown. But for those in the know, those within the covert resistance factions, the signs were unmistakable. Dr. Elara Quinn was at the forefront of it all. She had barely slept, poring over every data point from the artifact, analyzing its readings. She couldn't shake the feeling that the object had more to reveal. The signal it sent out was no accident, nor was it a simple relic of a forgotten past. There was a purpose behind it, a purpose far grander than anything humanity had ever imagined. But as she prepared her next move, something changed. The sky above was suddenly filled with the deep, rumbling sound of something far too large for any earthly technology. Elara, along with her small team of scientists, hurried outside. Her heart sank as the horizon was blotted out by the arrival of the Sci-Fi fleet. Massive ships, cloaked in darkness, hung suspended over Earth like predators ready to strike, the unmistakable sign of an invasion. The Sci-Fians hadn't come just to study, they had come to conquer. Within hours, cities around the world were struck with unrelenting force. The first wave of the invasion was swift and brutal. Energy blasts tore through skyscrapers in New York. Entire regions of Africa were obliterated in a matter of minutes, and Europe's military installations fell silent as their power grids were disabled. Humanity, still reeling from the revelation of the artifact's existence, now had to face an enemy that was not only technologically superior, but had no regard for human life. Back in the United States, Captain Elias Stone, a former military strategist now leading a clandestine resistance force, had been preparing for something like this. He knew that humanity's technological advancements weren't enough to compete with the Sci-Fians. The resistance was ill-equipped and fragmented, but they had one advantage: they were unpredictable. The Sci-Fians had underestimated human resilience, and now they would pay for it. As the Sci-Fian ships began their orbital bombardment, Stone gathered his top officers in a hidden underground command center. The resistance had no time to waste, and the first order of business was simple: survive and regroup. "We don't have the firepower to take them head-on," Stone said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We're going to fight them on our terms: hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, and guerrilla warfare. We need to learn everything we can about that artifact and fast." Dr. Quinn, now a central figure in the resistance, arrived shortly after. She had barely contained her shock as she relayed her findings to Stone. "It's not just a weapon, it's a gateway, a network of sorts. If we can unlock its full potential, it might give us the edge we need to fight back. But the Sci-Fians will stop at nothing to destroy it." "Then we'll have to keep it out of their hands," Stone replied, his gaze hardening. "We have one chance at this. We need to strike fast." Across the globe, humanity fought back in small, desperate pockets. In Paris, a small band of resistance fighters launched an ambush on a Sci-Fian ground unit, using newly developed energy rifles derived from the artifact's technology. In Moscow, a team of engineers infiltrated a Sci-Fian communications hub, disabling their network for critical hours. But while these skirmishes were small victories, they only bought humanity precious time. The Sci-Fians were relentless. As the days passed, Earth's leaders convened in secret, pooling their remaining military resources. Despite the chaos, something unprecedented began to happen. Humanity, for the first time, began to work as one. Former rivals and political enemies set aside differences, rallying together for the survival of the species. Every country, every continent, became part of the growing resistance movement. But amidst this surge of human solidarity, something even more startling began to unfold. A group of soldiers, exposed to the energy of the artifact, began to show signs of extraordinary abilities. Heightened reflexes, superhuman strength, and a strange, almost psychic connection to the artifact's power. It was as if the artifact itself had chosen them, imbuing them with the strength needed to challenge the Sci-Fians. These soldiers became the first of what would later be called the Awakened, and they would be humanity's ultimate weapon in the war to come. Captain Stone, now fully aware of the human potential awakened by the artifact, realized that the Sci-Fians' greatest mistake wasn't just underestimating humanity, it was failing to comprehend that humans had a boundless capacity for adaptation and innovation. The Sci-Fians may have had the technology, but humans had the will to fight. As the battle raged on, the first small victory for the Resistance came. They had managed to capture a small Sci-Fian ship that had been downed during a skirmish. Stone knew that this was just the beginning. The war had just begun, and humanity was about to prove that they would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, harder, faster, and smarter than anyone expected. And the Sci-Fians would soon realize that humanity had something they could never replicate, the unyielding spark of hope. The days following the initial assault were grim. Earth had suffered devastating losses, and the Sci-Fians showed no signs of slowing their brutal campaign. Cities lay in ruins, governments scrambled to coordinate a defense, and millions of civilians were displaced. Yet, amidst the chaos, the human spirit refused to break. Captain Elias Stone, now the de facto leader of Earth's resistance, watched the skies above as the Sci-Fian ships remained visible day and night. Despite their dominance in space, the Resistance managed to create small, hard-hitting groups that had begun to chip away at their occupying forces. Guerrilla tactics were humanity's greatest weapon, using the terrain, creating ambushes, and exploiting any weakness they could find. Dr. Elara Quinn was working feverishly in a secure lab deep underground, trying to understand the true potential of the artifact. Its strange energy signature had begun to resonate with certain individuals, sparking something within them, human abilities that had never been seen before. Soldiers exposed to its power had begun to exhibit enhanced senses, accelerated reflexes, and in rare cases, telekinetic abilities. It was as though the artifact was unlocking a latent potential buried deep within humanity's genetic code. The first awakening occurred in a small, heavily fortified resistance base in the mountains of Colorado. Private Kiera Lopez, a soldier of no particular distinction, had been assigned to a simple task: securing a perimeter during the routine supply drop. When the Sci-Fian forces ambushed the camp, Lopez found herself cornered, facing a towering alien soldier who wielded a weapon capable of disintegrating entire walls with a single blast. Desperation took over. In a moment of pure instinct, Lopez reached out toward the advancing enemy and, without thinking, willed the soldier's weapon from his hands. The alien stumbled, disoriented, as if hit by an invisible force. She reacted faster than ever before, seizing the opportunity to take down the alien with a swift strike. The event was so extraordinary that it couldn't be dismissed. Word spread quickly, and soon the first of the resistance soldiers were being carefully monitored, each exposed to the artifact in varying degrees, to understand the full extent of the awakening. Meanwhile, Dr. Quinn was both awed and terrified. She understood that this was not merely a chance event. It was the artifact's influence, unlocking something within humanity. Her scientific mind raced with possibilities. The artifact was a gateway, yes, but it also appeared to be a catalyst for evolution. The human race was undergoing a transformation unlike anything in history, and there was no going back. The power, it's more than just physical, she told Captain Stone, as the two of them sat in the makeshift command center. These humans who are awakening, they are starting to sense one another. There's a shared connection, as if they can communicate through thought. Stone, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and wariness, nodded. We need to harness this. If the Sci-Fians get wind of what's happening here, they'll stop at nothing to eliminate it. We're not ready, Quinn admitted. We barely understand what's happening. These abilities, what if they start to evolve beyond what we can control? Then we adapt, Stone said, his voice resolute. Humanity thrives in the face of uncertainty. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. The Resistance's next step was clear: used the newfound abilities to launch a decisive strike. A heavily fortified Scythian supply depot, located in the remote deserts of North Africa, became their target. This would be no ordinary mission. With the help of the awakened soldiers, they would infiltrate the base, gather vital intelligence, and destroy the weapons the Scythians were using to keep their hold on Earth. As the strike force assembled, a new wave of determination surged through the resistance. They had something the Scythians didn't: hope. Hope was a powerful weapon, and with each victory, it grew stronger. The resistance was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to reclaim their world. The night before the mission, Captain Stone stood overlooking a makeshift map of the desert base, his mind turning over every possible scenario. He knew that the awakened soldiers would be crucial, but he also understood the risks. The Scythians were no fools. They had begun to notice the strange patterns emerging among the humans, and they were not about to let their prize slip through their fingers. But Stone had no choice. He had to take the risk. Earth's future depended on it. "We fight for tomorrow," he muttered to himself, his gaze hardening. "We fight for the light." The next morning, as the resistance launched their assault on the Scythian base, they would discover that they were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting to shift the balance of power in the universe. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy would know that humanity was no longer a mere footnote in history. Humanity was awake. The assault on the Scythian base was nothing short of a spectacle. The awakened soldiers led the charge, their newfound powers making them an unstoppable force. Sergeant Kira Lopez, her telekinetic abilities honed through weeks of training, was the first to breach the enemy defenses. She thrust her hand forward, and a wall of heavy Scythian barricades shattered like brittle glass. Behind her, the rest of the team moved swiftly, using a combination of conventional weapons and the raw power of the artifact to dismantle the enemy's defenses. Inside the base, Dr. Elara Quinn's team worked feverishly to access the facility's central control room. They had one goal: to retrieve the data hidden within the Scythian systems, data that could reveal the true nature of the artifact and its connection to the larger galactic war. What they uncovered would change everything. As Quinn accessed the control room, her fingers moved across the holographic interface with practiced precision. "This is it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. The data was encrypted, but even through the complex layers of security, she could sense something familiar, a pattern, a resonance, like the artifact itself. It wasn't just an artifact, it was part of something far bigger. She unlocked the final layer of the encryption, revealing a series of star maps and coordinates. "It's a network," she murmured, her eyes widening in realization. "The artifact is a node in an ancient energy network, a nexus. There are more of these, scattered across the galaxy. Whoever controls them controls an unimaginable power." Captain Stone, standing guard outside the control room, nodded grimly. "So this is bigger than just Earth. The Scythians aren't here to conquer us. They are after the entire nexus. If they can harness it, nothing will stop them." Dr. Quinn's mind raced. The nexus wasn't just a power source. It was the key to altering the fabric of reality itself. Its energy could manipulate space and time, reshaping entire civilizations at will. The Scythians had been searching for these artifacts for centuries, hoping to use them to cement their reign as the galaxy's supreme power. But humanity's accidental awakening had thrown their plans into disarray. "We need to shut them down, all of them," Quinn said firmly. "The artifact on Earth is only one part of a much larger puzzle. If we can access the others, we can prevent the Scythians from fully activating the Nexus." As the resistance team regrouped, Stone's mind was already calculating their next move. "We've taken down one base," he said, "but this isn't over. The Scythians will retaliate, and they'll do it in force. We need to find the next nexus point before they do." Quinn's hands trembled as she input the coordinates into her device. there's a location on a planet called Thraxis. It's a dead world, one that the Scythians abandoned centuries ago. If the Nexus is there, we might be able to use it to turn the tide. The Scythian response came quicker than expected. Within hours, the sky above Earth darkened with the arrival of reinforcements. A fleet of warships, far larger and more powerful than the one that initially invaded, descended toward Earth's atmosphere. But this time, humanity was ready. "We have a plan," Stone said, his voice steady despite the odds stacked against them. "We're taking the fight to Thraxis." Dr. Quinn's heart raced. They were about to embark on a mission that could either secure humanity's future or bring about its extinction. The Nexus was not just a tool, it was a force of nature, and whoever controlled it would dictate the fate of the galaxy. As the Resistance prepared to launch their most ambitious operation yet, they discovered something chilling. The Scythians were no longer relying solely on their advanced weapons. They had begun harnessing the Nexus energy themselves, using it to amplify their own physical abilities. The first awakened Scythian soldiers emerged from the shadows, beings with enhanced strength, speed, and a strange, unearthly power. Humanity was no longer fighting just to survive. They were fighting a war on two fronts, against the Scythians' overwhelming technology and against their own evolving potential. The question now was not if they could win, but whether humanity could control the power of the Nexus without becoming what they fought against. As the fleet prepared for launch, Captain Stone shared a final thought with Dr. Quinn. "The future of humanity isn't in these artifacts, it's in us. If we're going to win, we need to hold onto what makes us human." Quinn nodded. The fight was far from over, and they were about to step into the heart of the galaxy's greatest conflict. The Nexus was out there, waiting to be discovered, but the cost of its power might be greater than they could ever imagine. And as the fleet's engines roared to life, a single thought echoed in the minds of the Resistance. The galaxy was about to awaken, and humanity would be the one to lead it. The journey to Thraxis was a calculated risk. The planet, once a flourishing hub of intergalactic trade, had long been abandoned by the Scythians after an ancient cataclysm rendered it uninhabitable. But Dr. Ilara Quinn's analysis of the star maps had shown a lingering presence of energy that could only be explained by the Nexus. If the Scythians had hidden their most powerful artifact there, it would be the key to everything: their conquest, their empire, and, potentially, humanity's annihilation. As Captain Elias Stone's fleet entered Thrax's orbit, the planet loomed like a dead giant, its surface scarred with craters and overrun with alien vegetation. The skies above were painted with swirling dark clouds, a constant reminder of the ancient cataclysm that had shattered the planet's once thriving ecosystems. Beneath it all, however, lay the heart of the Nexus, waiting to be unlocked. The plan was simple: infiltrate the ancient ruins of Thraxis, locate the Nexus core, and disable it before the Scythians could arrive. Dr. Quinn had confirmed that the Nexus, though dormant for centuries, was still active, its energy pulsating beneath the surface in hidden chambers deep within the planet's crust. But what they hadn't accounted for were the Scythian scouts who had followed their fleet in secret. Alert! The voice of Lieutenant Carrie Yates rang out across the fleet's communication channels. "Scythian ships have entered orbit. They've been tracking us since we entered the system." Stone cursed under his breath. "How many?" "At least 20 warships, Commander. They're deploying ground forces to intercept us." "Hold steady, everyone," Stone ordered. "We go to the surface as planned. We can't afford to fight them here. This is about the Nexus. Focus on the mission." As the Resistance's shuttles descended through Thrax's turbulent atmosphere, they were met with a heavy bombardment. The Scythian fleet fired upon their descent, hoping to cripple the incoming forces before they could even touch the ground. The first wave of Resistance troops took heavy losses, but they pressed on, determined to reach the Nexus at any cost. Private Kira Lopez, now one of the most powerful of the Awakened, led the charge with her team. Her telekinetic abilities made her an unstoppable force as she deflected enemy fire and cleared the path for her comrades. They moved like shadows, swiftly and silently, cutting through the Xiphian forces that sought to stop them. Every step forward felt like a victory, but the weight of their mission never left her. "We're almost there," Lopez said, her voice strained through their comms. "The energy readings are off the charts." Dr. Quinn, leading a separate team with Captain Stone, moved through the dense jungle towards the entrance to the ruins. The energy signature was unmistakable, radiating from the very heart of the planet. They were close. But as they neared the ruins, the Scythian reinforcements arrived, soldiers enhanced by the very power of the Nexus, their bodies glowing with unnatural energy. These were no ordinary Scythians. They were the Awakened, their strength, speed, and intelligence amplified to godlike levels. As they closed in on the resistance team, Quinn's blood ran cold. Stone raised his rifle, but even he knew that these enhanced Scythians weren't going down easily. "Hold your ground," he barked, even as he felt the heat of their enhanced weapons bearing down on him. Lopez, already on the ground with her team, sensed the threat before it became fully visible. She extended her hand, and a powerful shockwave erupted from her, throwing the first wave of awakened Xiphians backward. The resistance team used the opportunity to return fire, but Lopez could feel the difference now. The Xiphians had learned to tap into the Nexus power, but they were not as strong as they thought. She could feel their minds, their thoughts, like faint whispers in the air, a connection that only a human could sense. "This isn't just about firepower," Lopez whispered to herself. "This is about will." The battle raged as the resistance continued to push forward, with every member of the team fighting with everything they had. But it was becoming clear that the Nexus had begun to respond to the awakened Scythians. Their powers were growing stronger by the second. If they didn't reach the Nexus soon, it might be too late. Stone and Quinn finally reached the entrance of the ancient temple buried beneath the ruins. As they descended into the depths, the chamber before them opened to reveal a towering structure, pulsating with the energy of the Nexus. The artifact within was massive, its crystalline form almost alive with energy. "This is it," Quinn whispered in awe. "This is what the Xiphians have been searching for." But as her eyes focused on the core, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The core was not dormant. It was awakening, and it was reaching out, calling to the awakened Xiphians, amplifying their power, making them more dangerous by the second. "We're running out of time," Stone said urgently. "We need to deactivate it, now." But as Quinn moved forward, the ground trembled beneath them. The Nexus was not just a power source, it was a trap, and now the resistance had unknowingly triggered its full activation. The battle for control of the Nexus had just begun, and it would take more than just brute force to win. The Nexus pulsed with an almost sentient awareness, its energy flowing through the ancient temple like blood through veins. As Dr. Elara Quinn approached the core, the walls around her seemed to thrum in response, vibrating with raw power. The air was thick with static, a crackling energy that made her skin prickle. The core itself was a towering crystalline structure, shimmering with a faint glow that seemed to shift and change, as if it had a life of its own. "This is it," Quinn whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. "This is what they've been after." Captain Elias Stone, standing behind her, kept a wary eye on the entrance. The battle outside was still raging, with the enhanced Scythians pushing their forces forward. The ground trembled with every blast, but the temple's ancient stone seemed to hold strong. He knew they didn't have much time. They had to shut down the Nexus before it was fully activated, or the Scythians would gain control of an unstoppable force. Stone turned to Lopez, who had joined them, still radiating energy from her telekinetic abilities. She was visibly drained from the fight, but her eyes burned with determination. "We'll hold the line," she said, breathing heavily. Just make sure you deactivate it before it's too late. Quinn nodded, her hands moving quickly as she connected her devices to the Nexus core. The readings on her screen were incomprehensible, flashes of symbols, strange patterns that defied logic. The core's power was growing, its energy becoming more erratic, as if it were aware of her attempts to manipulate it. "The system is too complex," Quinn said, her voice strained. "I can't break through the encryption. It's protecting itself. We need to find a way to access its deeper functions." A rumbling sound filled the air, and the walls of the temple seemed to shift. The ground cracked, sending tremors through the floor. Stone's heart raced. Something was happening. The Nexus was reacting to their presence. The Xiphians outside were drawing closer, their enhanced forces closing in on the temple entrance. "Quinn, hurry!" Stone shouted, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time." Lopez stood guard, her eyes scanning the room. She felt a strange connection to the Nexus, a pull, an almost magnetic force. Her telekinetic abilities flickered, responding to the energy flowing from the core. She felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever experienced before. Her senses sharpened, and she could almost hear the hum of the Nexus as it reached out to her, beckoning her to come closer, to tap into its infinite power. "Something's wrong," Lope said, her voice distant. "It's trying to pull me in." Dr. Quinn didn't have time to process her words. She was focused entirely on the task at hand. Her fingers flew across the interface, trying to bypass the complex security protocols. "It's not just a weapon," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "It's a bridge, a portal." The Xiphians didn't just want to control this galaxy. They wanted to control everything. The implications of Quinn's words hit Stone like a blow to the chest. The Nexus wasn't just a power source, it was a means of domination on a galactic scale. Whoever controlled it could alter entire realities, bend space and time to their will. If the Xiphians succeeded in activating the full potential of the Nexus, the Resistance would have no hope. "I need more time," Quinn said, sweat beading on her forehead as she struggled to access the core's deepest functions. But the Nexus wasn't giving her time. The energy surrounding the core flared, and suddenly the room was bathed in a blinding light. The air hummed with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Stone shielded his eyes, his heart racing. The core was coming alive in ways they hadn't anticipated. Outside, the sounds of the Xiphian assault grew louder. The awakened Xiphians were closing in, their amplified powers making them nearly unstoppable. Stone's team was running out of options. They were in the heart of the storm, with no way to escape. Their only chance was to neutralize the Nexus, and fast. Lopez's voice broke through the chaos. "It's calling to me. I can feel it. It's trying to make me like them." Stone turned to her. "Resist it, Lopez. Focus." But Lopez's eyes were glowing, her telekinetic abilities surging uncontrollably. The power within her was rising to a level she couldn't control. She could feel the Nexus, the energy coursing through her veins, offering her power beyond imagination. It promised to make her stronger, faster, more than human. But at what cost? "No," Quinn shouted, realizing what was happening. "The Nexus is awakening within her. It's using her to strengthen itself." Stone acted on instinct. He grabbed Lopez's arm, pulling her away from the core. "Don't let it take you. You're still human." Lopez struggled against him, her body crackling with energy. "I can feel it, Captain. I can become more. We can all become more." "Don't listen to it," Stone ordered, his voice breaking through the haze of power that surrounded Lopez. "You're one of us, human. Don't let this thing turn you into a weapon." Lopez hesitated, her body shaking with the strain of holding back, and then, with a sudden cry, she collapsed to her knees, her telekinetic aura flickering and fading. Quinn, sensing the opening, pushed harder at the interface. "I've got it," she exclaimed. "I've unlocked the final protocol. We can shut it down." Just as the first of the awakened Xiphians stormed into the room, the Nexus core flickered, then went dark. The room fell silent. The battle outside raged on, but in that moment, the Resistance had won a small but crucial victory. The Nexus was no longer a threat, but the cost of shutting it down was just beginning to reveal itself. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, and the Xifians would stop at nothing to reclaim their power. And as Stone and his team regrouped, one thing was clear. Humanity had made its mark on the universe. Now it would fight to keep it. Lopez stood guard, her eyes scanning the room. She felt a strange connection to the Nexus, a pull, an almost magnetic force. Her telekinetic abilities flickered, responding to the energy flowing from the core. She felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever experienced before. Her senses sharpened, and she could almost hear the hum of the Nexus as it reached out to her, beckoning her to come closer to tap into its infinite power. "Something's wrong," Lope said, her voice distant. "It's trying to pull me in." Dr. Quinn didn't have time to process her words. She was focused entirely on the task at hand. Her fingers flew across the interface, trying to bypass the complex security protocols. "It's not just a weapon," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "It's a bridge, a portal." The Xifians didn't just want to control this galaxy. They wanted to control everything. The implications of Quinn's words hit Stone like a blow to the chest. The Nexus wasn't just a power source, it was a means of domination on a galactic scale. Whoever controlled it could alter entire realities, bend space and time to their will. If the Xifians succeeded in activating the full potential of the Nexus, the Resistance would have no hope. "I need more time," Quinn said, sweat beading on her forehead as she struggled to access the core's deepest functions. But the Nexus wasn't giving her time. The energy surrounding the core flared, and suddenly, the room was bathed in a blinding light. The air hummed with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Stone shielded his eyes, his heart racing. The core was coming alive in ways they hadn't anticipated. Outside, the sounds of the Xifian assault grew louder. The awakened Xifians were closing in, their amplified powers making them nearly unstoppable. Stone's team was running out of options. They were in the heart of the storm, with no way to escape. Their only chance was to neutralize the Nexus, and fast. Lopez's voice broke through the chaos. "It's calling to me. I can feel it. It's tried to make me like them." Stone turned to her. "Resist it, Lopez. Focus." But Lopez's eyes were glowing, her telekinetic abilities surging uncontrollably. The power within her was rising to a level she couldn't control. She could feel the Nexus, the energy coursing through her veins, offering her power beyond imagination. It promised to make her stronger, faster, more than human. But at what cost? "No," Quinn shouted, realizing what was happening. "The Nexus is awakening within her. It's using her to strengthen itself." Stone acted on instinct. He grabbed Lopez's arm, pulling her away from the core. "Don't let it take you. You're still human." Lopez struggled against him, her body crackling with energy. "I can feel it, Captain. I can become more. We can all become more." "Don't listen to it," Stone ordered, his voice breaking through the haze of power that surrounded Lopez. "You're one of us, human. Don't let this thing turn you into a weapon." Lopez hesitated, her body shaking with the strain of holding back. And then, with a sudden cry, she collapsed to her knees, her telekinetic aura flickering and fading. Quinn, sensing the opening, pushed harder at the interface. "I've got it," she exclaimed. "I've unlocked the final protocol. We can shut it down." Just as the first of the awakened Xifians stormed into the room, the Nexus core flickered, then went dark. The room fell silent. The battle outside raged on, but in that moment, the Resistance had won a small but crucial victory. The Nexus was no longer a threat, but the cost of shutting it down was just beginning to reveal itself. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, and the Xifians would stop at nothing to reclaim their power. And as Stone and his team regrouped, one thing was clear: humanity had made its mark on the universe. Now it would fight to keep it. The silence after the Nexus shut down was deafening. The oppressive hum of energy that had filled the room with its otherworldly power faded, leaving only the soft sounds of breathing and the distant echoes of battle from the surface. The Nexus had been deactivated, but at what cost? The team's relief was short-lived as they turned their attention to the aftermath of the deactivation. Lopez was still kneeling on the cold stone floor, trembling. Her eyes, once full of determination, were now clouded with confusion and fear. The energy she had been forced to resist had left her drained, her connection to the Nexus severed, but its presence lingered in her mind. I could feel it, Lopez whispered, her voice hollow. It was inside me, telling me I could be more. It wanted me to join it. Stone crouched beside her, his voice soft yet firm. You held on, Kara. That's what matters. You're still you. But Lopez wasn't so sure. She had felt the lure of the Nexus, the temptation of infinite power, and for a brief moment, she had almost given in. She shook her head, as if trying to rid herself of the feeling, but the weight of it remained. We need to move, Dr. Quinn said urgently, her fingers flying over her tablet. The Nexus may be down, but it's not gone. The Xiphians will adapt. They always do. We need to get out of here before their reinforcements arrive. Stone helped Lopez to her feet, keeping an eye on the still pulsing walls of the temple. Even though the Nexus had been deactivated, its lingering energy was palpable. The ancient structure seemed to react to their movements, its walls groaning as if protesting the disruption. The resistance team made their way through the winding corridors of the temple, heading toward the surface. Outside, the sounds of battle had escalated. Scythian warships filled the sky, and the ground trembled under the weight of their landing forces. They had only moments before the Scythians arrived in full force. We need to buy time for the extraction, Captain Stone said, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Lopez, take a position. Keep the Scythians off us. Lopez nodded silently and moved toward a nearby ledge. With a quick motion, she raised her hand, and a powerful wave of telekinetic force erupted from her, sending a group of approaching Scythians flying backward. Their amplified bodies, enhanced by the Nexus energy, were not as resilient as they seemed. The force of Lopez's strike sent shockwaves through their ranks, buying the resistance team just enough time to make their way to the surface. But they weren't out of danger yet. The Scythians were relentless. As they reached the surface, the team was met by a swarm of enhanced soldiers, their weapons charged with the raw power of the Nexus. These were no ordinary soldiers. These were the Scythians who had fused with the Nexus, their minds and bodies transformed into weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Quinn's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, I've located an extraction point. It's on the far side of the planet, near the northern ridge. We need to move now. Stone assessed the situation. They were vastly outnumbered, and the Scythians' enhanced soldiers were closing in. Lopez, still recovering from her brief connection to the Nexus, was struggling to maintain her telekinetic control. The resistance team had no choice but to fight their way to the extraction point. Lopez, focus. We're almost there, Stone shouted, trying to keep her grounded. She nodded, pushing the last of the doubt and weakness out of her mind. The Nexus had tried to break her, but she would not let it. Her power surged once more as she repelled a wave of Xiphian soldiers, throwing them back with force. The resistance team moved swiftly, using every distraction, every cover point, and every burst of power Lopez could muster to carve a path to the extraction zone. But the Xiphians were relentless. They adapted faster than the team had anticipated. As the resistance made their way toward the extraction point, a powerful explosion erupted ahead of them, sending debris and dust flying into the air. The ground shook violently as a massive Xiphian warship descended from the sky, its engines roaring with the fury of 1,000 storms. we're running out of time, Captain Stone growled, his grip tightening on his rifle. We need to get out of here, now. Lopez's eyes narrowed as she focused on the incoming threat. The warship was massive, but it was vulnerable. Its engines, its weapon systems, everything depended on one key point, a weak link in its shield generators. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. Get down, Lopez yelled, her voice laced with determination. She raised her hands, gathering the last of her telekinetic energy. The air crackled with power as she concentrated on the warship's weak point. In one final, desperate burst of energy, she threw every ounce of her strength into the attack. The warship's engines exploded in a violent flash of light, sending the massive vessel spiraling out of control. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the ship crashed to the ground in a deafening explosion, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Stone's eyes widened in disbelief. Kara, you did it. Lopez's body was trembling, and her breath was shallow, but a fierce smile spread across her face. We're not done yet. As the team raced toward the extraction point, their hearts pounding in unison, they knew one thing for sure. This battle was only the beginning. The Sci-Fians had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn that the Resistance was not just a force to be reckoned with. It was a force that would stop at nothing to protect the future of the galaxy. And as the sky above Thraxis lit up with the fire of their victory, the Resistance made their final push toward the unknown. The war for the Nexus had just begun, and humanity had already made its mark. The chaos of Thraxis' battlefields was now far behind them, a burning remnant in the distance as the Resistance team raced toward their extraction point. The massive Sci-Fian warship was now nothing more than a twisted wreck, its explosion sending a surge of victory through the hearts of the Resistance fighters. But even as the smoke cleared, the tension remained thick in the air. They had won a significant battle, but the war was far from over. As they reached the designated extraction zone, the sky above them darkened, heavy with the storm clouds that had plagued the planet since its ancient cataclysm. A low rumble of thunder echoed across the barren landscape, an ominous reminder that the battle for the Nexus was not yet decided. Lopez, her body still trembling from the strain of her powers, gave one last push, sending the debris scattered around them flying into the air with a blast of telekinetic force. She had no strength left, but the adrenaline and will to survive kept her going. We're here, let's get to the ship. Dr. Quinn, who had been monitoring their escape route, spoke up. The shuttle's incoming. It'll be here in a few minutes. Stone's gaze shifted to the horizon. The Sci-Fian forces were regrouping, but their primary advantage had been neutralized. The Nexus core was shut down, and they had lost their most formidable weapon. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. Humanity had proven it could stand against the overwhelming power of the Sci-Fians, and it had the strength to rise in defiance. We've done it, Stone said, looking at his team. We've made it out with the Nexus core deactivated, but it's only the first step. The Sci-Fians will regroup. They'll come after us again. Lopez, her breath still ragged, turned to face him. We can't just run. We've seen what the Nexus can do. We have to find a way to destroy it, once and for all. Quinn nodded, a grim expression on her face. The core may be deactivated, but it's still a power source. It may have been dormant for centuries, but if the Scythians get their hands on it again, they'll find a way to reactivate it. We need to figure out how to destroy it permanently. Stone's eyes flickered with understanding. We'll figure it out, but first, we need to get back to base. We need reinforcements, and we need time to plan. As the shuttle descended, the team loaded onto the vessel, their bodies battered and bruised, but their spirits unbroken. Stone sat in the cockpit, staring at the distant wreckage of the Scythian warship as it burned in the sky. The war was far from over, but humanity had shown its strength. They had taken the fight to the Scythians, and they had survived. As the shuttle lifted off, Quinn turned toward the others, her mind already working through the data she had collected from the Nexus. We can't afford to underestimate the Sci-Fians again. They may be down, but they're not out. We need to figure out how to end this once and for all. Lopez, her telekinetic abilities still fluctuating from the strain, spoke quietly. I felt the Nexus calling to me. It wants me, wants all of us, but it can't control us. We're human. We're more than that. Quinn turned to her, a faint smile tugging at her lips. That's exactly it, Lopez. The Xephians think they can use the Nexus to control everything, but they don't understand what it means to be human. We are more than just power. We have something they'll never have, the will to fight, to survive, to adapt. Stone nodded in agreement. Humanity's strength isn't in what we have, but in what we do with it. We're not bound by the same limitations as the Scythians. We can think, we can change, we can create. The shuttle soared into the sky, heading toward their base, a sense of hope beginning to replace the grim determination that had driven them up until now. The resistance had been forged in the fires of battle, but it had also been forged in the belief that humanity, with all its flaws, could rise above the forces that sought to crush it. As the team set course for their next destination, Stone looked out the window, watching the stars in the distance. They had made it through the darkness. Now, they would bring the light. We're just getting started, he muttered to himself, the words filled with unshakable conviction. Humanity isn't just going to survive this fight. We're going to win it. And in that moment, something deeper than the struggle to survive stirred in their hearts, a sense that their purpose had just begun. The galaxy had been thrown into chaos, but humanity had shown it could rise above it. The resistance was no longer just a group of soldiers. They were a symbol, a promise that the dawn of humanity had arrived, and nothing could extinguish the light they would bring. The war had only just begun.